The government has been warned against slowing down the pace of migration in a bid to free up housing supply. Joining us live now is the independent MP Allegra Spender. Yeah, this warning has come from the Business Council of Australia this morning. Allegra, we've spoken about housing, which we'll get to in a second, but also migration. What are your thoughts on Jennifer Westacott's report that comes out today, basically saying don't use migration as a scapegoat?
Look, I really support the BCA's report on migration because migration is absolutely critical to the Australian economy. It's critical to so many of our industries, tourism, to our universities. But I think it's absolutely right that, frankly, decades of political sort of inaction and failure have led to us to this housing crisis. But frankly, they're not the same thing. There's migration, which is really good for our economy, and frankly, housing inaction, where the government needs to take urgent action across the country.
Is current migration levels too high?
No, I don't think so. I think that we have a good, strong migration system. For me, it's really important for the community to get really good people into the country, and also make sure that people have a pathway, to permanency if they've got the right skills to bring to Australia. So, I think you can play around the edges, but fundamentally, I think our migration system is working. But I think also, however, that the government is right to look at it and try and make sure that it gets, is even better. But frankly, housing and the problems with housing are really separate, and frankly, the government has to work really hard on this.
Okay, well, on that, the government's going to meet with the state leaders next week in National Cabinet to address housing. How confident are you that a deal can be done on boosting supply?
It is absolutely critical. What I think is critical to come out of next week's meeting is firstly protections for renters. I have already over almost 50% of my community are renters, and that's they're having a very difficult time right now. So how can you improve renters' right is absolutely critical, but also housing supply. It was really worrying that in a couple of months ago we had the lowest housing approval for a number of years, and this is a time where increasing supply is absolutely critical. So I'm calling on the government to use, the money in the federal government to really incentivise the states to make fundamental changes to planning and zoning laws, because unless those laws get passed, unless we have fundamental change to planning and zoning, this is just going to be an aspiration of increasing more housing. We're just not going to get it. Okay,
just back on when you said there about renters' rights and you want those improved, what are you suggesting there? A freeze?
No, not at all. I think a freeze is, the Greens' policy of a freeze, frankly, is policy that sounds good, but in practice would really prevent us growing housing, and that is what we really need to do. And the growth in housing is not just in the cities; it's also in rural areas. I've got one of my crossbench colleagues from a regional area saying that in her area they still can't build enough housing, even though there's plenty of land. So I think that the issue really here is actually sort of zoning and making sure that we're really focused on actually building housing. And I think rent freezes can really prevent that, and that's why I'm fundamentally against them.
Okay, if you're away from, I hope you can still hear me with your earpiece that's popped out. There we go. If there's no freeze on rents, what is a right? What is one right that you want renters to have that they don't have now?
Look, I think in terms of evictions, better rights in terms of evictions, and also in terms of rights in terms of longer leases. People come to a place, they want to put down some more roots, and I think that we should be looking to extend, people's lease terms so that they can stay for longer. I think those are two really important rights that we should be looking at.
Okay, yeah, so much of this falls on the state. So we've spoken about this in the past too. And the Minns government, it's looking at suburbs including Camellia, Everleigh, Parramatta, St Leonard's, not in your electorate, Allegra, but that's something that the Minns government is looking at today. More details later. Allegra Spender, we're out of time. Appreciate your time as always.